And tonight on PM Express, it has become necessary that we reopen the conversation about attacks on journalists because one more journalist has been threatened. And tonight, the Multimedia Group, operators of Joy News and other media outlets, has filed a formal complaint at the police CID asking for investigation and protection for its journalist Erastus Asaridonko following threats issued by Asin Central MP Kennedy Japan. The situation brings back memories of Ahmed Swale, who died under similar circumstances. And so tonight we're asking, what kind of protection does the state have for personnel of the fourth state of the realm? And so the Multimedia Group, as indicated, has in the last few hours filed a formal complaint against the MP for Asin Central, Kennedy Japan, for threatening one of its journalists, Erastus Asaridonko. His comments follows the journalistic work Erastus undertook during the recent shooting and killing in Ejura. Now, in his remarks, he indicated that if he, Kennedy Japan, were president, he would have ensured that Erastus Asaridonko is beaten mercilessly. And he continues to say he made similar threats in the recent past against Ahmed Hussein Swale. The investigative journalist at the time had undertaken some journalistic work, and Ahmed was later horribly killed. The MP made these comments on the Attitude program on Net2 TV on July 9, 2021. And that is the reference point for the Multimedia Group to sue. Now, what does Multimedia want? It is demanding for security protection for Erastus Asaridonko. It also calls for a thorough investigation into the threats issued by the legislator. Many journalists are unhappy about the situation. That's the reaction we are getting. They're calling on the state to amplify the protection for journalists. And so tonight we're asking, what kind of protection is there for the fourth estate of the realm? What security is provided by government, by the security agencies? I'm talking about the police and all the other security agencies that matter. What kind of security are journalists getting in this country for being the watchdog or for playing the watchdog role? I am joined tonight by engineer Dr. Kenneth Ashigwe. He is CEO of the Ghana Telecommunications Chamber. Emmanuel Bombande is a conflict resolution professional and senior mediation advisor at the UN. And Manasseh Azoriah-Winnie is editor-in-chief of The Fourth Estate, a project by Media Foundation for West Africa, and he's also an anti-corruption campaigner himself. He has faced similar circumstances, and we'll be tapping into some of his experiences. Let's get into the full swing of the discussion when I return from this break. And welcome to PM Express. We're looking at threats and attacks on journalists, and it's become very necessary that we revisit that conversation tonight. Let me say good evening to you, gentlemen. Always good to see you. And I think to set the tone for the discussion and for the sake of viewers, it's only fair that we listen to what the Asin North MP said in the video that has gone viral.
Now, this boy should be beaten seriously. It's so annoying. Some journalists answers Obama should beat the hell out of him. May a president say be a guap boy with
So that was the Member of Parliament for Asin North, Kennedy Japan, issuing those threats. Let me start with you, Manasseh Azoriah-Winnie. Having been through a similar situation, how does this make you feel?
Well, I think this will make any reasonable human being feel very uncomfortable. And for being a Ghanaian, it also makes me feel very ashamed, considering the fact that we have had incidents of this nature. And it didn't end well with the late Ahmed Swale. And if we are living in a society that authorities would always say, don't take the law into your own hands. And once you are told not to take the law into your own hands, then we operate with the assumption that others will seek justice on your behalf. That is, those that are mandated by the law, the police and others. If I should threaten the daughter of the president on this show, the show will not end. And then I would have national security operatives picking me up. I will sleep in my house tonight. Not just the daughter or child of the president, but any of the powerful people. That is, even if nothing happens to them. Ahmed Swallow was openly threatened, and he eventually lost his life, and nobody lost sleep over it. So when something happens and then you expect the state to act and they don't act, it is often an avenue for impunity. And for someone who has been threatened a number of times, it isn't easy to be threatened. I wouldn't say, apart from people who are suicidal, I don't think there's anybody who walks about saying or thinking that, well, it is normal that somebody can just threaten me and end my life or beat me or anything. Nothing warrants what has happened. And it is even very disturbing. I put a post on Facebook and a known MPP sympathizer came saying, well, that doesn't mean we shouldn't hold the media accountable. And I asked a specific question that, can you tell me a single thing about Erastus Asaredonko's report that wasn't true, that is false? And as we speak, nobody has been able to point a single aspect of that report that is false. And so if somebody does their work and does the work so well, elsewhere, people like Erastus should have been highly commended. But for him, we would have been deceived, let me put it that way, by that statement of the police that there were exchanges of missiles and whatever leading to the shooting. At least we have something to compare or hold against the account of the police. So such people should be highly commended. And here we are having people issue threats. And normally people say, well, it isn't just that the person is in Accra, he cannot. Sometimes when these threats are issued, that person may not necessarily have to carry it out. They incite public opinion against the journalist, against the media house, and then anybody at all can carry out that threat. So it isn't something that we should take lightly, Aisha.
Now, Dr. Ashigbe, as a former media manager, how does this issue that keep recurring strike you?
Well, thank you very much, Aisha. I have said it severally that for those of us who have earned our keep by virtue of journalists going out into the field all the time to be able to bring stories and to be able to generate the advertising revenue to pay us, it is our responsibility to ensure that journalists practice this craft with the safety that it requires. The interesting thing is that the mandate that the Constitution gives, clearly in Chapter 12, talks about journalists holding leadership to account. The only way that can be done if they are able to operate within an atmosphere that is devoid of all of these threats, that is devoid of these physical attacks. As we speak, let me remind you, there was Pius, one gentleman who was shot in the leg during covering the elections. The first surgery has failed. He has to go for a second surgery. You have the issue of Latif, your colleague. And then definitely there's the one who had paid the ultimate sacrifice. And journalism is not a crime. There is no job in this world that when you do wrong, anybody takes sticks or beats you up. And we also definitely run a country that our current president, it was during his time as Attorney General that the criminal libel law was repealed. So for any journalist who practices craft, you cannot be subjected to any criminal liability. And not to talk of this case, and I think my Manasseh was spot on, that nobody can point out. You see, the thing we should not lose sight of was that was a live, it was live coverage.
Yeah.
So this is not a program where you even say it was canned. So you go home and go and prepare it. It was covering the incident as it happened. So nobody, well, I'm still waiting for it. But even if there was a wrong that was done, there are clearly spelled out ways in which we deal with that. The president does not have the power to beat anybody, and the president would not go out beating anybody. So to issue out threats like that, and to have a very influential person who is the chairperson of a very influential, committee of parliament, issue threats on live TV that is also covered, it's definitely very worrying. And for all of us, and it's not only for those who have managed media before or for media practitioners, as citizens of this country, we ought to know that the media hold for us the right to free speech, the right to free expression. And so when that gets threatened, it is all of us, our rights, that is being trampled upon. And we should all seek that that should not happen. Because currently, as we speak, the only realm that is left to be able to keep in check the three other is the fourth estate, is the media. And for them to be able to do their jobs, they cannot be subject to issues like this. And even if Erastus was not a journalist, you cannot issue such threats because a teacher has gone to do his work and has not done well, a politician has passed laws that has failed, a doctor has prescribed wrongly. Nobody does that. Currently, there's an issue against 37. It is going through the legal course. So even if the honorable member of parliament finds something wrong, he knows the ways in which to handle it. And I think it's important to also state this. In his statement that he made, he didn't play that, but he talked about the fact that it is the media that is going to take this country into mayhem. Yeah. I beg to differ with him, and the facts will prove him wrong. If you go into the Rwanda example that he gave, go and find out who was on the Rwanda media house that did that. It was a politician like him. So definitely, if it's for media houses that allow politicians come and give them unfettered room to be able to do this, they are the people that will plunge us into trouble. And it's the politicians. So we really need to rein that in. When you are a person of influence, if you are giving opportunities like I have been given today, we need to be guarded and ensure that we can use the media to build rather than to destroy. And so definitely, Honorable Member of Parliament, in this particular instance, you were wrong to have issued this threats. And we cannot take it for granted. And I'm happy that Joy FM have done the things they have done by using the process. And I'm hoping that the police, the first thing they need to do is to ensure that they can provide some level of security to Erastus. That is very, very important. And for Multimedia itself, we need to pay attention to that. Even if the police will do it, let's also make sure that we are doubly assuring that his security is preserved. And definitely then the investigation has to happen. I know for a fact that the Media Foundation for West Africa, GJA, are planning to see if they can have a press conference. That has to happen. Journalists throughout the country, we need to come together to ensure that things like this stop. Definitely we should be responsible, but this is not the cure for it. And this definitely is not in support of the democracy that we all are practicing now.
Mr. Bombande, since the killing of Ahmed Swale in 2019, I mean, the police has not been able to provide any tangible updates on the matter. And it has since not brought his killers to book, which is very worrying. Now, what is more worrying is the fact that the MP who was accused of threatening Ahmed Swale before his mother, and who himself is currently the chairman of the Defense and Interior Committee, recently mentioned the name of someone who he alleges was behind the killing of Ahmed Swale. What kind of image does this paint for the Ghana police, the legislature, and the country as a whole?
Thank you so much, and good evening to my colleague panelists. You have to start by appreciating that it is precisely because the police following on all the stories about Ahmed Swale and incidences that are similar, because they have reneged or have been incapable of performing their duties satisfactorily for the people of Ghana to be able to be assured that when you threaten, it doesn't matter who you are, you'll be held accountable. Because the police have not succeeded in doing that, there has been the impunity that continues. And so we are in this conversation precisely because the impunity continues. Now, keep in mind that when we talk about our democratic space, particularly in the Fourth Republic, I want to be the first to acknowledge, going back to my civil society days and in my career development, that we are lucky in Ghana to have men and women of courage, some of them participating in this conversation, who have expanded that space and have provided all of us in Ghana the capacity to hold our heads high internationally and call ourselves Ghanaians who belong to a democratic nation. So the threats are abhorrent. The threats are simply unacceptable. And so the question is, the Joy FM complaint to the police CID, would it lead to any outcome that will end the impunity I just talked about? So if I go back to your question and following the narrative around Ahmed Swale and others, I doubt it. And so I am compelled to say that the impunity will continue. Second, I'm happy that all of you have mentioned the role of Honorable Kennedy Agyapong. He is no ordinary member of parliament. He is the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Defense and Interior. He travels internationally. In the same interview, he talked about, towards the end, he talked about going to Central African Republic. And so he cannot be unaware of how other African countries going through war look like because of the irresponsibility and the lack of leadership that is provided by politicians. He cannot pretend to be unaware that one of the challenges is how civil society organizations and the media cannot play their watchdog roles. And that's why war continues to perpetuate itself. And my other comment before I leave this is simple. We are talking about the threat, but there was a grievous component, basically accusing, since it was multimedia, of trying to sabotage government or government machinery, of corruption, of blackmail, which is even grievous because what that seeks to do is for the people of Ghana to lose confidence in their media practitioners. If that were to happen, it takes completely backwards the progress that we have made. And that is why, for me, whilst we are addressing the threat, yes, in the immediate, maybe this week and next week, the option of providing Erastus Asaredonko some form of security, it might be an option that can be considered. But do our journalists have to be protected by the security for them to be able to do their work? I don't think so. The environment for all journalists to be able to operate without any fear must be persistent and prevailing all the time. A journalist cannot, it's like saying that a doctor should not do their work because if they're doing their work, you have to provide them security. A teacher cannot teach because you have to provide them security. The journalist is a noble profession. Why should they be given security for doing the work that they have been trained to do? And a work that is significant for our peace, for our stability, and our democracy. So these are my initial comments. And I think that in his position in Parliament, it's a very serious situation that is developing. And I will even go further to say that beyond the complaint, I don't think he has the temperament to be the chair of the Defense and Interior Committee of Parliament.
And I'm happy that you talk about the other allegations he made about journalists here at Multimedia. Well, the Multimedia Group has since lodged a complaint with the CID, and its lawyers say they're getting ready to go to court. Excerpts of the statement they issued in the last few hours, and I'll read excerpts of it. It says, "We are solicitors for the above named and hold firm instructions to issue this statement in reaction to defamatory comments made on or about Friday, July 9, 2021 by Mr. Kennedy Japan on his Net2 TV network and broadcast virtually to the world." And it says, "Our client states the following as unimpeachable facts." And one, it says that the reference to a meeting with the CEO of the Multimedia Group is accurate only to the extent of the brief discussion over a petition against the move in 2017 to reduce transmission coverage radius of certain radio stations to 45 kilometers. This petition, delivered to and received by the sector ministry on May 11, 2018, was issued and signed by management of 10 radio stations, including Kent City Media Limited's Oman FM. 2, that the group of stations operating, including 100-kilometer coverage ready, fearing the devastating impact of the threatened reduction to their established audience reach and investment made on the strength of the existing frequency reach, felt out of courtesy that the said meeting must be had with him as then chairman of Parliament's Communications Committee. That it bears stressing that neither did the CEO of the Multimedia Group step out of his known character and established professional business conduct to discuss anything personal, nor such as separately, privately concerned Joy FM and the Multimedia Group Limited as a business, and certainly never a word about the falsely alleged concerns of its staff. And it says that neither Joy FM nor its CEO has ever made the falsely alleged demand for money from government or the NPP, and certainly not from any individual in government or the NPP for any purposes. That the questioning in malicious projection of purported evidence of criminal culpability only because he ever saw some stuff in Gabi Asariotre Dako's house, management has become aware of the following instances. 1, a meeting seeking an interview with then candidate Nana Adodankwa Akufo-Addo ahead of the 2016 general elections. 2, an invitation by Mr. Tridakun to a number of media personalities from various media houses in December 2019 for what was a normal interaction on governance, and an invitation to a number of staff to discuss the possibility of their joining Asasi Radio ahead of its commencement in 2020. That in any case, Joy FM, a world-class brand, has for over 2 decades established itself as a unique brand championing development and critical journalism. It endeavors always to operate in full compliance of law, the constitutional dictates for media practice, and follows best practices of journalism, which allows staff to exercise independence of thought and action and professionally. That in fact, it is impossible for the hundreds of staff from diverse backgrounds and private interests working together to produce news and programs to be dictated to, influenced, or to agree to his false allegation of a grand agenda against government, the NPP, any entity or individual. Our clients are seriously considering all their options at law and caution against repetition and of those reckless and malicious falsehoods. And it says be advised accordingly, and it's stamped by A Partners at Law, solicitors for the Multimedia Group. All right, so that was the statement that was issued by lawyers. Manasseh, for an investigative journalist, you face these issues a lot. When you heard of this threat, in fact, you've expressed how worried you've been, but you've received such threats in the line of your duty. How do you deal with it, I mean, over the period?
Well, Aisha, because it's security matters, I cannot disclose everything here, but I will say I am very fortunate to have been given the police protection, courtesy the National Security Minister, Albert Kandapa. But I also agree with Mr. Bombandi that nobody should do their work we shouldn't get to the point that a journalist should walk about with police protection. Not all journalists can have police protection. And if you care about your own privacy, it is not something that is fashionable to be driving around or moving around and making your call everything. Then there has to always be somebody by you. So it isn't pleasant at all, if I should put it that way. The other thing also has to do with the emotional stress and toll that has on you. Sometimes beyond the journalist, you have people who love you, people who, family members, friends. I can imagine people having to call Erastus or meeting him anytime from now. Be careful, oh, these people are not, the country is no longer safe. Oh. The repetition of that has some emotional toll on the journalist. You need your peace of mind. You need that kind of freedom to go about your duty. But if after every conversation with an acquaintance, with a friend, whether in church, wherever you meet people, they always have to end with one caution. They keep drumming this over and over into your ears. It isn't good for the sanity of the journalist. It isn't good for your peace of mind. And it isn't good for your family, because we all have family members who love us. We take inspiration from them. And sometimes when you have a feeling that your family, even they don't want you to continue with this work again, it is often very difficult to turn your back against those who truly love you and goes to face the world. So it isn't an experience I would wish on an enemy.
Collectively, how do we handle this matter? I mean, we know we've been divided sometimes on our front to get justice for journalists. I mean, how do you, advise or recommend that we address this issue collectively, because it involves all of us?
Is that to me?
To Manasseh.
Yes. On this issue, I would say that people like Mr. Ken Ashigbe has been very consistent, irrespective of which media house the journalist comes from. And when he even left Graphic, I thought it would change, but he's been very consistent, and I must commend him. You wouldn't find any attack on a journalist somewhere without him being strongly advocating for something to be done.
True.
Even though he's been betrayed in a very painful manner that we all know. That aside, I will also say that part of the blame should also come to us journalists. The blame is not because it is our responsibility that anybody has to threaten us, but we have not stood together enough. When this happened, a number of media houses are treating it as a Joy FM thing and Erastus Asaredonko threats. And Multimedia, you are my station, but you also did something that I found extremely unfortunate. You had somebody who threatened a colleague journalist. A colleague journalist was murdered. We haven't even had a killers. That you invite such a person, you had an interview with a person, and all the top people in Multimedia were promoting this interview as if you had an exclusive with a Nobel Prize winner in wisdom. So I asked somebody, if Ahmed Swale had been a journalist with a multimedia group who was threatened by this MP and later was found, was shot dead, would Multimedia have given him this same platform to celebrate him? So it is one unfortunate thing which I think should not be repeated. We should come together and have the mindset that if you attack a journalist, you have attacked all journalists. When we are able to condemn the action enough, incite enough public opinion against that action, somebody else sitting somewhere may want to think twice before going that road. So I think that one of the things we can do as journalists and media houses is to take the position of Mr. Kenashigbe, that we shouldn't wait till it happens in our media house before we begin to express concerns, before we know that we have to fight together. The media is very powerful. I said in a post on Facebook and Twitter this evening that there is this deliberate and seemingly coordinated attempt to incite public opinion, incite hatred against Joy FM. And it started when the president gave a speech in Cape Coast, where he mentioned the fact that, well, some people are attacking free SHS and all of that, which I found to be unfortunate, because we have to look at the loopholes. The MPP, as we know it, in 2016, just look at the various scandals which formed the core of the MPP's campaign against John Mahama's administration, and tell me, which media houses' stories did the MPP rely on to brand John Mahama's administration as corrupt, incompetent, and all? Look at those investigations. You cannot win power and all of a sudden, that media house that you praised so much, that media house that you hailed, that media house whose stories formed the basis of your campaign, suddenly becomes so evil that you want to incite hatred. They shouldn't forget, no government will stay, party will stay in government forever. And normally, the journalists and media houses they are happy with when they are in government, when they go into opposition, such journalists and media houses also find favor with those that are in government. So stations like Joy FM, Joy News, the Multimedia Group, have not only worked in a way that also benefited opposition parties, but if you take the democracy, if you take our development, if you take the fight against corruption, tell me which other media house in this country for the past 10 years, if you ask me or if you ask anybody to name the top journalistic stories, apart from Anas Arimio Anas and the Tiger PI, is there any other media house that has consistently done journalism with impact, done journalism that has brought about the nation saving hundreds of millions of cedis, getting people out of prison, building health facilities? There's no media house that can compare. And it is in the interest of this country that media houses such as the Multimedia Group survives. I have worked there, and I know what management, the sacrifices that management of the station, the danger they subject themselves through to allow certain stories to even pass.
Well, well spoken, Manasseh. But Dr. Kenashigbe, I realized you were nodding when Manasseh was making those submissions. How does this threats and actions affect the growth of bold and fearless journalism in the country? Just as Manasseh has indicated, it is in the interest of the country and the government itself to allow media stations like this one to survive.
Well, thank you. I was nodding and I was pained with some of the references Manasseh was making. And typically what happened when I was at Graphic, when one of my staff, who we had taken a case to gone to court, in open court when we are all there, then decided that he was no more interested in the case. And I say to people that it was because of that singular action that has brought us to the point where Ahmed Swale is dead. Because if at that particular point in time, if you had prosecuted those two people who had beaten the journalists who had gone to cover a football event, and then people will start knowing that there are repercussions for these things when you do them. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And even the NMC at the point when we took disciplinary action against that journalist for what he had done, and going through the processes, the NMC thought that was wrong and we should reinstate him. And so So the things that we can do to ensure that these things do not happen is to ensure that the hot stove principle applies. Because it's definitely a fact that if journalists cannot operate in a system where they are threatened, they are attacked, they are beaten, they are maimed, and nothing seems to happen. And so for me, what is really required is for collective action. And we should bear in mind, we will not be able to get everybody to come together. All we need is a critical mass coming together and deciding. There are some media houses that really are not media houses in name. They're just there to do the bidding of their paymasters. They definitely will not come and deal with these issues. But media houses that are set up as a business, media houses that have ethics at the bottom of what they do, you all need to come together and say this cannot happen. We need to ensure that we hold the feet of the various institutions that we have gone to, charge the police, all the GJ, NMC, all of them to the fire and say this has to be dealt with. And in dealing with them, this is just the immediate one. Let's not leave other issues that are behind. We need to add all of them to it and ensure that everybody who has touched the journal is brought to book. It is not for nothing that you don't touch a policeman. And criminals in every jurisdiction that know that you cannot be called a cop killer, because they know that once that happens, the resources that we've all given to the police, the first people they use it to protect is themselves. And definitely the pen is more mightier than the sword. So we should be able to, within the legal realms, be able to use the pens, be able to use the TV, use every media house to bring focus on this. It is not for nothing that when you shine light laser on the hard equipment, you cut it. So if you are able to bring that pressure to bear collectively and say this thing is wrong and it ought to be righted, we can push and make sure that the right thing is done. These are the things I have said, that the time has come for us to have the martyrs list at maybe the GJ place. We need to have the villains list also at those particular places. And we should be reminding everybody who is involved, from the police, with Latif's beating, with currently the Honorable MP for this threat that has been issued. All of them, catalog them and ask questions. We need to repeatedly ask questions. And beyond those questions that we need to ask, as media organizations, the time has come for us to elevate it beyond our national barriers. If we are not able to get justice, it has been shown that the ECOWAS court was able to bring justice to a case in Gambia where they found the Gambian government. It was not criminal, but it was civil. And there was the sanctions and the pecuniary penalties that were, when they found them guilty. It is not only the amount of money that would have to be paid, but also the fact that states would not want to be found wanting in there. So if our local authorities will not be able to hold those who are wrong, be they journalists, be they owners of media houses, be they politicians, if they are not able to hold them accountable, we need to also start exploring international venues. So I did not see Joy FM mention the ECOWAS court in it. You've gone to other bodies, but we should also look at the ECOWAS court as well and be able to bring action so that we can get justice done. It is very important that some of these people who issue this threat, when the shoe is on the other foot and the system is against them, the institutions they are going to come to is the media. So I would urge the Honorable Minister that in his sober mood, he should go back and listen to what he said again. Watch the work. And you notice also that he was not even talking about the work that, the journalists had done. He was talking about what he has gone to say at the committee. And what wrong did Erastus do? If had not been for the live coverage that we saw, would there be material? And as we even speak, the current committee that is sitting is still using footage from the multimedia, for their sitting. I think today I had, one person who was there. They were looking at footage of what multimedia had done. But that fact that Manasseh made, multimedia, credible media organization, CTFM, Graphic, all of them, they would outlive every political party. It has happened. If you go back and look at the history of it, it happens. Because media that is credible, it's an anti-establishment media. And as they say, it is the person who is starting the path will not know whether it's crooked. It is for the media who is sitting at the back to say it. And most of the time when it is being said to people like that, they can't take it. But we cannot be allowing these threats to fester. So it is important for media houses to come together and decide that for this particular one, it has to be the last time that it happened. We cannot go the route that Ahmed Swale went, and this has to stop. And I'm hoping that the Honorable House of Parliament would also look into this issue. It is important that when we all do this as well, we also allow the systems to work. We also should not be seen to be being the judges in our own courts. So that's why the call for multimedia about investigations is very important. Let's investigate where culpability is. Let's ensure that the sanctions that are required to make us a democratic and a country of laws is actually applied.
And definitely this must stop, because journalism is not a crime. Mr. Bombande, let me pick your thoughts on this. What should Parliament be doing at this moment, and the MPP as well, on this issue?
First of all, it's in the interest of the MPP not to allow a prominent member of their party to be seen to be the one who consistently has now become infamous as the one who threatens the security of media practitioners. And they can do that in several ways. They can engage diplomatically and hope to change the behavior of Honorable Ken Ajapong. They can cause Ken Ajapong to issue an unqualified apology of his own conduct towards media personnel, because it might help to assuage the type of anger and unpopularity of his own actions. But if I make this observation, it is to reinforce my earlier point. If you review the literature of international human rights law, the international system frowns profusely against people in decision-making who become perpetrators to people's human rights. How much more when the people are media practitioners who, in their watchdog role, report abuses against people's rights. So there is a double-edged sword here, because the ones who bring to the limelight, both nationally and internationally, issues related to the protection of civilians and their rights are the media practitioners. When you threaten them, the international community takes notice. But if the one who threatens them is a decision maker, the chair of a parliamentary defense and interior committee, the international community takes it at a much serious and higher level. And that's why this becomes a very important issue for discussion. And I would want us to take note of that. And your question is also interesting because it touches on, and I like the introspection of Manasseh and Ken, because they have been dispassionate in this conversation about the media itself. The reason why this for me is important is I have always argued we should all prefer a media landscape that has its mistakes and deficiencies, because that is 100 times much better in protecting all of us, our rights, than to have a media landscape that can be praised, but then their work falls short in the type of democratic dividends that we want. And people should always keep it in their mind that the media does not ask favors from anybody to be able to do their work. It is upon this observation that the media practitioners must begin by saying, it doesn't matter who is my paymaster or which media house I belong to, my professionalism requires that I put principles first, and then I can put interests second. And at the third level, some of that interest might go towards the interest of my paymaster. Because you can leave that paymaster today, but you can get another job if in society, you are recognized as a professional media practitioner. And that is why with the introspection, anything that shrinks the media space, anything that reduces the media space must be of concern to all of us. One of them is what we are talking about, the direct threat. But the second one is an inconvenient truth. And that inconvenient truth has already been articulated in one way or the other. The moment regulators started closing down some radio stations like Radio Gold, we left only the Media Foundation for West Africa and maybe to some extent GJA, I don't have the full details, to now carry on the fight. That it doesn't matter what mistakes were made, you don't do that because you are trying to shrink that media space. And what is happening now is that the chickens are coming home to roost. Because you see, it will begin to hit one media house after another. The circumstances might be different. The narratives might be different. But the important thing is, anything that you do to reduce the media space and to control them, you are taking away the right of the people, because when the media cannot do their work, then the rights of the people cannot be articulated. And obviously, finally, the work of the police. And we've talked about that already. Everybody is looking at them to be able to do the right thing.
And obviously, this is a collective fight for all journalists, the security agencies, to make sure the right things are done. When I return from this break, we'll be talking about the journalists on the personal level, at the individual level. How do we protect ourselves when we are out there, being the mouthpiece for the vulnerable, being the ones who are playing the watchdog role to ensure accountability from government, and even providing platforms for government itself to come closer to the governed? Stay with me. Welcome back to PM Express. We're talking about safety of journalists, and we're talking about how even though we are promoting the job of government, we're also criticizing government. How should government take the criticism that comes from the media? Should we be objective? Should we kowtow to government's instructions and always do what government wants? What should the media do, and what should individuals who are members of the media do to protect themselves? And I want to put that question to Dr. Ken Ashigbe. We're running out of time. I mean, individually, on the individual level, what should we do as journalists when we are out there executing our duties?
Well, it's definitely important for us to train journalists in safety and self-preservation, because journalism is not supposed to be martyrdom. So we need to find ways in which we need to protect ourselves. Once we put ourselves that we'll do what journalism is not, which is different from PR, which is supposed to be critical, hold people accountable, anti-establishment. People will not like us. So we need to have that at the back of our mind. In as much as we would want the state to create a safe environment for us to operate in, it's not an utopic world. So we need to have that at the back of our mind. And it's not just the journalists. It is also for media houses like Multimedia to provide that necessary training that allows journalists to be able to protect themselves, allows them to be conscious of the environment in which they work in. Another important fact about that is for all of us as journalists to realize the fact that we need to be each other's keeper. So we need to have a network amongst ourselves that when something is happening to another journalist, if I have a camera, I have a, whatever, I'll tend to be able to collect evidence. Because one of the challenges is also the evidence that is required to ensure that when these things happen, we are able to prosecute it. And I think we need to commend Multimedia. You've been one of the journalist media houses in recent times that have been able to prosecute a case to the point where we have had some judgment, be it's a civil and the sentence were not too, but we need to continue doing this. And you need to continue pushing the envelope to ensure that this particular one, beyond a petition, we need to follow up with it and ensure that it is dealt with. So sometimes I get worried when Latif's case, I'm not still hearing about it, from the media, but we'll go back and remember some other cold cases that are not related to us. One of the things that we need to do as journalists, we don't like fighting our own fight, but we need to start doing that. When was the last time we started asking questions again about our brother from the city effort?
And I like that point, Dr. Kenneth Ashibe. We are always quick to speak for people. We are the voice for the voiceless, but sometimes we are not the voice for ourselves, and that is certainly something we should start thinking about. I'm grateful, all of you, for joining us. Dr. Kenneth Ashibe is a CEO of the Ghana Telecommunications Chamber. Emmanuel Bombande is conflict resolution professional and senior mediation advisor at UN, and Manasseh Azoria-Wene is editor-in-chief of the Fourth Estate and an anti-corruption campaigner. I'm grateful that you joined us. Viewers, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of our program.